thanks again for joining. We're really glad to have you all here today. Today's conversation is quite an important one, to be fair, because it touches on something that affects a lot of us, and maybe we don't even realize that it is affecting us or not. We're going to be exploring the costs of not talking and the reality that stress doesn't simply disappear when we ignore it. Whereas matter of what it does is it settles somewhere into the body, and it shapes how we feel, how we respond, and how we move through life day to day. So often it's a bit quiet over time. Unfortunately, we're living in a time where emotional overwhelm is becoming extremely normal, and many of us are carrying a lot more than we speak about. So whether it's work pressure, family responsibilities, maybe your unresolved experiences, or just simply the pace of modern life, it can be quite overwhelming and quite lonely. And while we often push through it, our bodies tend to keep score. So today we're going to discuss how stress shows up in our bodies, and how myself, Amiga from the Wholeness Pod, and Kerrie focus on supporting the bodies through regeneration, recovery, and reducing stress using different types of therapies, including the therapies that we offer at the pod, which are tech-led therapies, as well as what Kerrie offers, which is talking therapy. But it's also important to recognize something, that true well-being isn't just a physical thing, it's an emotional well-being as well. And that's exactly why this conversation and this collaboration matters today. So for those who don't know who I am, I'm Amiga. I'm co-founder of the Wholeness Pod. We are the bio wellness tech-led business. We have locations in Sutton and Dulwich at the moment. And today we're joined by someone who brings a deeply human, compassionate, and clinically grounded perspective to this conversation. Kerrie is a counsellor, BA Honours, DIP counsellor, MBACP. She offers in-person sessions, ecotherapy, which is like a walk and talk session, which is quite nice if you don't want to sit in a room. And she also does online and phone support. So her work focuses a lot on creating safe spaces for people to explore what they're carrying, to understand how stress shows up in the body, and to reconnect with themselves in a more sustainable and supportive way. So Kerrie, thank you so much for being here with us today. To start, could you just kindly share a little bit about your background, the work you do, and why conversations like this about talking rather than suppressing feels so important right now?
Yeah. So, hi, I'm an integrative counsellor. So I work with adults and adolescents. So that's from 16 plus. My approach to counselling is a blended method of psychodynamic and person-centred. I also use certain tools and techniques from CBT, mindfulness, and DBT as well. So I've worked as a counsellor for over 10 years now. So I provide in-person sessions at Oru, and I also do like the walk and talk ecotherapy within Sutton and surrounding areas, being Cheam and Morden. So I've also taught on counselling programs, people who are actually obviously going into counselling themselves. So I've mentored them, and I've actually taught the actual classes as well. I offer support with various areas, such as obviously stress, anxiety, depression, loss and bereavement, areas such as OCD and self-harm, and facilitating the growth of self-esteem. So I do work with various areas with my clients as well.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. So yeah, we're now going to get into the conversation, but we're basically just going to start off with, I just want to ground us in something that we hear a lot and all the time, especially us being face-to-face with clientele in our different clinical spaces. But it's not always something that we as humans understand, and that is the nervous system. So it's definitely become a bit of a buzzword. We see it a lot on social media, in a lot of wellness spaces, in a lot of conversations, as I just mentioned. But what does it actually mean in a real everyday sense? And like, more importantly, how is it shaping the way we respond to stress and how we cope and how we carry things in our bodies? Because so many people, it's not just what they're dealing with, but more so it's how their system is responding to it as well. So Kerrie, this is where your expertise is so valuable. Could you walk us through this in a really simple and relatable way? I mean, you can use some technical terms, but just what, you think the audience will be able to understand.
Okay, so the link between our mind and body is where our mental perceptions of threat trigger our physiological reaction. So basically prompting the body to release things like adrenaline and cortisol. So cortisol is, when we reach a high level of cortisol, that's when we feel incredibly stressed. So people can experience many physical symptoms of stress, things like muscle tension, headaches, even digestive issues. People sometimes experience things like IBS as well. Stress can also have a huge impact on our immune system. So some people do end up having difficulty with not just fighting infections, but also developing things like MS and autoimmune diseases as well. So not many people are aware of the physical impact stress has on our bodies. And as a society, we tend to downplay our symptoms a lot of the time, suppressing our feelings or even pushing through. And this can be due to many factors, normally external or even internal pressures that we feel ourselves as well. So being able to talk about our issues helps to alleviate the amount of stress we feel, obviously talking therapy being one of them, and the impact it can cause. So building awareness is basically the first step to being able to manage our stress.
Okay, amazing. And then in terms of the nervous system, we do have a bit of a breakdown here on the screen. But what actually is the nervous system? So I know you mentioned about it, like regulating behavioral and emotional responses. But could you expand a little bit more on what exactly the nervous system is?
Okay, bear with me. I've got a few issues with my slides here.
That's okay.
Okay. So the nervous system regulates our behavioural and emotional responses based on our perceptions of safety or threat. So basically, the nervous system is like our body's communication network, which helps us to move through, think, feel, and respond, whether that's in a calm state or dealing with stress.
Okay, all right, that's pretty straightforward. And how is it working for us day to day? Because how is it working for us day to day, often without us even realizing that it's working in the background?
Okay, so the nervous system provides us with the tools we need to balance out our bodies, basically, such as regulating our breathing, like I mentioned before, there's certain areas like digestion and even our heart rate. So basically, it helps us to respond to stress, rest, and everything in between. So it's a process of balancing, so we feel safe and calm. But when it's out of sync, that's basically when our stress system, our sympathetic, for example, and our rest and recovery system, which is a parasympathetic, so you can see that on the slide, we may feel anxious, overwhelmed, or even disconnected, depending what's happening for us.
Okay, great, thank you. So that's pretty self-explanatory about what the nervous system is, because like I said, we do hear that term a lot, but we don't know like the technical terms behind it. Okay, so now that we've kind of understood about the nervous system, and how that works more broadly, what I want to bring us into is something a little bit more specific, but actually also very powerful. So the vagus nerve, that's also something that is becoming a bit of a trending topic right now. It's something a lot of people may or may not have heard of before, but it plays a huge role in how we feel both physically and emotionally. Is that correct?
Yes. So,
okay. And what's really interesting is it's deeply connected to our ability to feel calm, safe, and regulated, as you previously touched on as well. So could you help us understand what actually is the vagus nerve and why does it matter to our bodies so much as humans?
Yeah, so the vagus nerve is one of the main communicating pathways, basically, from the brain to the body. So it runs from the brainstem down through to the back of the neck and into like our heart or organs, basically, so being our heart, lungs, and digestive system. So the main role of the vagus nerve is to help regulate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for basically slowing things down. So you can see that on the previous slide. So when we talk about feeling calm, grounded, safe, that's when your vagus nerve is basically doing its job.
Okay, so the vagus nerve is basically what is calming us down.
Yes.
Okay, so that's also quite a very interesting fact, because I think a lot of people recognize that feeling of being on edge, where your mind might want to relax, but your body is just doing the complete opposite and it's just unable to switch off. So would it be fair to say that in those type of moments, the vagus nerve isn't quite doing what it needs to do, or?
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah. So it's not that anything's wrong, because it's a biological reaction with the risk that's taking place, depending on how we perceive that risk. It's just that the body is still in a state of perceived threat. So instead of slowing down, it's basically being activated. So over time, it can become the norm in some people, where they feel heightened sense of anxiety and prolonged sense of anxiety at times. People start to experience things like chronic stress, restlessness, and even exhaustion.
Okay, which is very, very popular in living in a city like London, especially. And I think this is another point where it becomes quite important, because if someone's constantly in that state and they're not just feeling stressed mentally, but their whole body is operating from that that type of place, what is like the reasons for that? Or
so the vagus nerve isn't being activated regularly, so the body doesn't get enough time then to rest and recover. So it impacts everything such as sleep, digestion, emotional regulation. It's how our body functions. So it's not just about feeling calm in the moment, it's about an overall well-being long term.
Okay, that's great. So then circling back to the type of clients that we see coming to the pod, not necessarily knowing why they feel the way that they do, they just have the symptoms. And they just know that they don't feel settled within themselves and just not like their usual selves. So that's where like a few of our sessions will come in place, and after the initial session or the intro session, they may say things like, oh, I just feel a bit lighter, I feel a bit calmer, or I feel more like myself again.
Yeah, that completely makes sense, because what you're describing is basically the body shifting into a more regulated state, so from going from fight or flight or shutdown basically into rest and recovery.
Exactly. Okay, and that's not us telling our bodies what to do, we're just creating the conditions where it can naturally switch. So for example, with something like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, you're in a quiet, controlled environment, breathing in more oxygen, and people come out, like I said, feeling noticeably calmer and clearer. If someone's done like an infrared sauna session, there's more of a physical release of tension, which they can have a huge emotional impact on them as well. And even something like light therapy or pulse electromagnetic field therapy, that can help the body to come out of the constant on edge feeling. So it's almost like we're helping the body remember what calm feels like, instead of trying to like control that sense of calmness.
Yeah, so it's such an important point, really, because when our body feels safer, it actually becomes more easier to process what's going on emotionally. For a lot of people, talking can be feeling very overwhelming, but if their system is more regulated, then they can access things with more clarity and less intensity. So for example, in what you're talking about there with the oxygen therapy, they're basically grounding. So they're taking in the environment they're in, they're using their senses, so what they can see, what they hear, what they can feel. They're literally using everything. And that's a way of being more good in that process. Another way that's very similar, like for the vagus nerve, for example, is chewing gum. So that's using your senses again, using a sense of taste this time and the motion of chewing, because the nervous system is connected to the muscles in the tongue. The nervous system goes down to the back of the vagus nerve in that way. So it's a quick technique when we feel quite stressed. It sounds very simple, but when we feel quite stressed, it's a great way of connecting with the vagus nerve and activating it so you can go into rest and recovery.
Okay, yeah, that's so powerful. Because it just basically just shows that it's not just about the mind and it's not just about the body as two separate things. It's how the two of them work together. And sometimes before we can even begin to talk about what we're feeling, we need to feel safe enough in our bodies to even go to that next stage. Okay, so perfect. Now we're basically just going to understand the nervous system and the vagus. Now that we have understood the nervous system and the vagus nerve, can you expand a little bit and give us some examples of how people can perceive different types of threats? So we spoke about when you're in different modes of like stress or anxiety and just not feeling like your usual self, that technically is a threat to your body. A lot of people tend to ask themselves, why do I feel like this? What's wrong with me? It becomes more of a, what is my body trying to do for me in this moment? Is that correct?
Yeah. So as you see in the slide here, it demonstrates the polyvagal theory. Some people have probably heard it before, which demonstrates how your body has more than one way basically to respond to stress. Basically, with the vagus nerve, there's two branches that help to respond to the world around you, depending on how you perceive that threat. You would go from, for example, the ventral vagal system that looks at turning your body's sense of safety, helping with feeling safe, emotionally regulated and connected, whereas the dorsal vagal looks at the overwhelm of threat, basically, and it's your body saying it's too much. So you can see on that slide there, it shows you the rest and recovery, it's got fight and flight, and it also has shutdown on there as well. So being more aware of how our body responds to threat can help us gain a better understanding of the threat and drive system. So instead of asking why, we can acknowledge what our body needs and feel safe. Because a lot of the time when, for example, we're going to fight and flight, we're trying to analyze and pick apart, why am I feeling this way, and getting quite frustrated and worked up. But actually it's a process of not thinking why, but what does my body need to get out of this fight and flight? So an example, I can give some examples. So example of someone meeting some work deadlines, as we all do. So physical symptoms could be going into fight or flight, which is obviously the body preparing for a reaction to risk. And that person may have high internal expectations of themselves, so they're feeling a lot of the pressure there. So to move into rest and recovery, you can apply, for example, the 5 senses of the groundings, that's what you see, hear, smell, sense of taste and touch. Breathing techniques as well. So breathing in for 4, pausing, exhaling for 8, repeating that 3 or 4 times. And you could also use things such as cold exposure with water and ice if you want to. Shutdown, it's more of a gentle process because obviously the body wants to withdraw and protect itself. So shutdown, that's the dorsal vagal. So breath work is very good ones because it's gentle and it moves you gently into rest and recovery. So nothing too drastic. And light exercise such as walking, yoga, and prioritizing sleep. All these are obviously really good ways of trying to get you back into rest and recovery. And as well as that, it's really looking at the feel-good chemicals that we have to use to get us into these states of rest and recovery. So things like the dopamine, how we get dopamine, so a sense of achievement. So whether that be meeting our personal best when we're doing a running around a track or the treadmill, or whether it's a case of getting a sense of achievement with our goals at work or even in relationships or friendships there, working on that sense of achievement in some way. Or it could be the oxytocin, which is great for co-regulation through family and friends. We gain that love feeling from them.
From like hugging, things like hugging, right? Exactly that.
It's very beneficial, even though we don't see the initial impact as such. There's such a benefit in oxytocin. And then we've got endorphins, obviously can gain that through exercise, and serotonin, so sunlight and exercise. And that's why at times I do incorporate walk and talks with my clients, because it's a great way to get a lot of those chemicals going, as you can imagine, endorphin, serotonin, but also to lower levels of cortisol as well during that process.
Yeah, and that's great to know, because like for those who don't necessarily have funds to do some of these therapies or do talking therapy, there are free ways in which you can just do small things daily to regulate yourself and regulate your nervous system again. So those are some great tips there. Thank you. Okay, so when we start to look at it that way, it can also take away a lot of the pressure that you previously mentioned about people stressing about not knowing why they feel that way and feeling quite frustrated within themselves. But I guess the next question is, how do we move from that state because while it's like a protective state to be in, it's not necessarily somewhere we want to stay long term. So I know you mentioned before about all of the other three types of ways that you can do it. Would you like to expand on that point any further?
Yeah. So yeah, long term, it's a case of building awareness around the impact the stress has on us mentally and physically. Everyone will, it's very personal, so everyone will experience stress, but you will get people that experience it in different ways. Some people will feel more pressure during work deadlines, examination periods at school, and some may not. So it's very personal to the person. So it's a way of just building awareness around the impact the stress has, looking at things such as so the links between our behaviors, our feelings and our thoughts, really analyzing it in a way of reflection. In journaling is a great way. So there's many methods that can help. So to move from fight and flight to rest and recovery, for example, we need to move more gently through that process. So gradual exposure of doing these things. So to throw yourself in the deep end of journaling every night, for example, it's very much a gradual process. And then incorporating a few different techniques, whether that's grounding, whether that's breathing, or even incorporating more mindfulness, just simple things. A lot of people assume mindfulness is one of those things where it takes a lot of time. And actually it's very simple. It could be just having a shower, taking in the environment that you're in within the shower. What does your shower gel smell like? How does it feel to be in the water?
Being present.
Being very present in the moment. What does it feel like to be around the shower enclosures? There's steam, all these different things. Or even making a hot drink like a tea or a coffee, listening to the kettle boil, boiling the water, feeling the hot mug, tasting the coffee. So just, a few things here and there can really help with being a bit more grounded in those moments. So long-term recovery, journaling is great to process thoughts and feelings. You have, like I mentioned, about the mindfulness, movements such as gentle walking and yoga as well, just gentle movements. And then things like gaining oxytocin from spending time with, like we said, friends and family, which is a great way to help in the long run.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. There's some great points there, because even going back to what you were saying about recognizing why you're in that state, I remember, and being like in super stressful situations, I remember being in school and things like exams. The thought of having an exam was very stressful, but then there are other ways to navigate around it by doing, coursework, for example, not necessarily having to do an exam, which felt much more calmer. So I feel like once we understand the state that we're in and why our bodies might be there, then we can already start to shift how we respond. Because it's not always about just like pushing against it or trying to force yourself to feel a completely different way. You can just make small steps to start working with your body. So if your body has learned to stay in that protective mode, it can take a bit of support, as you mentioned, to help it feel safe enough to come out of it. And this is where both approaches come together again. Having a space to talk and understand what's going on, whilst also supporting the body in actually shifting it out of the state with different types of therapies. Yeah.
So through talking therapy, for example, I support the clients with building awareness around external or even internal pressures they face. So working through fear that may be attached as well, because that can hold someone in a state of being stuck, basically. You need to work through that fear. And then facilitate the movement to rest and recovery. So an example, journaling is about building awareness. Then we'd start to look at maybe some grounding or mindfulness techniques. It just depends on being able to establish where they are, so being in touch with how they're feeling, to see whether they are in fight or flight or even shut down. And it's very personal to that client, so it's incorporating their needs and interests. For example, someone that doesn't do regular exercise, you wouldn't fling them in to start doing some extreme exercise like HIIT, all that stuff. It would be like gradual process of walking. They may have an interest in things like yoga or Pilates, or it's just really incorporating their needs as well as what they need to get them into that rest and recovery state, and making the process manageable for them.
Great. So we're definitely on the same page there as well. You mentioned like journaling a couple of times. We do also advise anyone who comes to our door and to do journaling as well, just so that you're seeing seeing the progress, because with these type of therapies you might not notice after the first session what improvements you've had internally. But you know, with something like journaling, you can go and read back and see the small improvements that you've had over like the days or the weeks. So yeah, that's great. And then also journaling before beds can be good, because it can help you sleep better.
Yes.
And just put you in like a really positive state of mind. So yeah, we'd always recommend journaling. Okay, thank you. So now moving on to the next slide and the window of tolerance. So your knowledge on the nervous system and stress is super interesting. So thank you again for sharing that. But what we'd love to hear now is how you explain the idea of the window of tolerance, what exactly that is, and yeah.
Okay, so the window of tolerance is a model that basically focuses on the understanding of the nervous system regulation, but also looking at the experiences that stresses and trauma can have on that window. So the window comprises of a range of emotional and physiological states, which an individual is able to effectively cope, so showing how they can cope with stress, basically. So when experiencing trauma or perceiving a threat, the body's autonomic nervous system kicks into action and prepares for the response. So when someone is within their window of tolerance, so that's the rest of recovery, they're able to manage every day-to-day stresses and challenges without becoming overwhelmed, going into shutdown or fight or flight. And they're able to adapt to the response in situations as needed. And actually, individuals that are exposed to trauma, for example, may often experience this a bit too much, where they'd go into fight or flight. So it's a arousal state, where they would go to the two extremes, possibly, of hyperarousal and hypo. So hyper is fight and flight, and hypo, if you think of hypo as shutting down, that's like a freeze response, for example, as well, and withdrawal. So there's many factors that will contribute to how a person will be able to manage their window of tolerance. So things such as neurodivergence, people that have disabilities as well, and even hormones will have a big impact on our ability to cope with stresses. So for example, women are going through the menopause, or even within our women's cycles, certain times within that cycle we'll have a lack of estrogen, which actually has an impact on the amount of dopamine that we have access to. So it'd be lower than normal. So you will find those particular times, and obviously menopause, even pregnancy as well. You will notice that there's times where, you know, normally I can deal with, for example, the stress at work and deadlines, but this time of the month, or during this period where I'm going through perimenopause, menopause, I'm really struggling, or I'm finding this really hard. And that's all to do with our window of tolerance. And stress has an impact on us.
To add in there, sorry to take you off track.
That's okay.
That's also like a really interesting, I'm sure we have males and females on this, so that's really interesting to know that, because sometimes when you are coming up to your menstrual cycle, you can feel a bit like stressed and snappy, and you don't realize you're doing it until your cycle comes, and it's like, oh, okay, that's exactly why I'm like this. But it's not something that is done on purpose, and it's more just our bodies, isn't it? So yeah, that's quite interesting. Yeah,
and trauma as well, because normally what happens is with trauma, it will have an impact on the ability to regulate emotions, because of the amygdala being the frontal cortex not being to the size of what it should be, because of the impact of the trauma. So that can have a massive impact. And neurodivergence as well, regulating can be really hard. So it's just being aware of, not just of different times that we experience it throughout the months and years, but also what's happening for us, what has happened for us. People that experience a complex PTSD, trauma, and difficult situations in life, they don't necessarily realize that actually at these particular times, when people do end up going through menopause and pregnancy, all of this can have an impact on us gradually in life. So it's being aware of what we've experienced in the past, as well as what we're dealing with presently as well.
Okay, great, thank you. I hope that was as clear for everyone as it was for me. But as you can see from the slides, we've basically just given like some sort of examples of the type of state that you can feel in during these different types of windows. So anxiety, panic, racing thoughts, all that type of stuff. And then the window of the tolerance is the calming part. So yeah, thank you for expanding on that a bit more. Okay, so now that we've explored how the nervous system, the vagus nerve, the dorsal vagus system, and the window of tolerance works, let's look at what happens when we don't talk about what we're feeling, because obviously the whole point of this conversation is the cost of not talking and what it does to the body. So because stress doesn't just disappear, as I mentioned right at the beginning, it definitely finds somewhere to go in the body. And more often than not, it settles in places of the body that we're just unaware of. But what's the impact over time? Well, this can start to shape our health, our mood, and even how we show up in our relationships with friends and families or partners. So what we're trying to say is the cost of not talking is that eventually the body starts to speak to us and for us. So is this something you see often in your work? And could you talk us through how unspoken or suppressed emotions begin to show up physically?
Yeah. So suppressed emotions show up in our bodies in many ways. Temporarily, it can increase heart rate, blood pressure, and energy levels can fluctuate as well. While useful in short outbursts, chronic stress can cause sustained higher blood pressure, as most of us do know at times. Weaken immune systems, disrupts our digestion, muscle tension as well. It can lead to things like anxiety, depression, and fatigue. So it does impact us physically in many ways, more than what sometimes we're aware of. And burnout is a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion as well. So caused mainly by chronic or long-term stress, which does include constant fatigue, reduced performance, detachment, and manifests in running on empty, which a lot of people can relate to in many ways. Chronic stress patterns do include many emotional exhaustion, cognitive decline, such as memory loss, poor focus, which a lot of people do describe through sessions of when they feel quite stressed, even physical pain as well, and behavioural changes in social withdrawal and unhealthy coping mechanisms. So a lot of people, when they do feel quite stressed, when they've got high levels of cortisol, that can activate adrenaline in our system, which then takes us into fight and flight. Just depends on how the person relates to it. And then we do react. So whether it's the impact on us physically, we will notice various symptoms, as I've mentioned, and it can also impact on us wanting to withdraw. You know, people tend to withdraw socially, not wanting to really go out or speak to anyone at times. And then there's unhealthy coping mechanisms like we spoke of before. So coping, which we feel we need to rely on to get us through that process. So whether it's things like alcohol, drugs, food, there's many ways that we learn to cope.
Yeah. Okay. So just expanding on that, one thing that I'm sure you are very aware of is the topic mental health, and how in like the recent years, I don't know if it's become more of a thing that people are comfortable talking about, and if it's something that's just always been there, people have been dealing with it quietly, but it has been on the rise in recent years, and it's actually being acknowledged, and how mental health can affect different people in so many different ways, shapes and forms. But what are your thoughts on talking about mental health? Is that something that you see as I'm sure you do see it as a really positive thing, but yeah, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's crucial because it actually helps to reduce isolation, lowers stress, and also breaks down the stigma, promoting early interventions as well. So it opens a conversation, allows individuals to really process what they're going through, whether it's emotions or gaining clarity on what they're faced with, challenges, facilitating social connections as well, and also sharing these experiences, which actually helps to build resilience and encourages others to seek support as well. So suppressing emotions and stress can involve consciously or even unconsciously pushing down feelings, leading to behaviours like emotional numbing, avoidance, and intense distraction as well. Some people do go into that cycle of avoidance and denial. Some even procrastinate over it as well. So some examples would be ignoring pain, like physical pain, using substances, or overworking to avoid feeling as well. And that again is just pushing it away. pretending everything is fine while under stress. So examples of shutdown in this process would be when a risk is perceived, so that's the hypoarousal state, includes the freeze response, withdrawal, and even possible depression as well.
Okay, great, thank you. And while all those things might feel great in terms of suppressing it short term, long term, it's not going to have a positive effect. So yeah, thank you for explaining that. Okay, so when you talk about how talking therapy helps someone process what they're feeling, make sense of their thoughts, and release some of their emotional pressure, I think it's really interesting how we help someone get into that state where they can actually do that long term. You've obviously advised talking therapy and mindfulness and etc. But if someone is feeling really anxious, overwhelmed, or mentally busy, even sitting down and talking can feel a bit heavy for them. And like we sometimes experience this with like individuals who try therapy first time, but if you can move and they're a bit like cautious of doing a therapy, especially with something like hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Some people might be a bit claustrophobic or just see the chamber and get a bit scared. But if you can move beyond the initial fear, you will see huge benefits with therapies like oxygen therapy. It can be really supportive when incorporated into your life long term as well. So depending on while you're doing the treatment, some people might come and do a really intense course because they're quite far on in their health condition. But we also do try to encourage people to, like join a membership and change it from like your usual type of membership. We're not saying like don't go to gyms or anything. You can still do those type of things, but these type of therapies, they're very different and they are proven to support you long term. So yeah, I would say if you don't know much about oxygen therapy, cryotherapy, infrared sauna, PMF, definitely do a bit of research into it. Because yeah, like I said, we often see clients come in before something that requires focus or a lot of emotional capacity, and after a session you can definitely see how more calmer and more grounded and how clearer they are, just with small things of how they speak and their energy levels. We definitely do see a change. So for you, do you see people feeling tense and a bit overwhelmed during or even before their first session? Like, yeah, do you see that a lot or not really?
Yes, at times some clients feel very overwhelmed and even nervous when they arrive, especially if they've never been to counselling before. So that's something I normally talk about prior when I do my free phone consultation as well, just to engage their past experiences as well, which are really important. So normally take some time during the first session to gain understanding of any previous experiences, again, of therapy, but also a guide through if they are feeling quite on edge or overwhelmed, and I can pick that up to the beginning. We normally do some breath work or some grounding before we continue into the session. So it's just important to be aware that we need to provide a safe and calming environment for them, where the clients feel they can express themselves and explore at their own pace as well.
Great. That's perfect to know that instead of like starting from a place of overwhelmed, they're starting from a place of calm. Okay, so just to expand a little bit on the therapies at the Wholeness Pod, in something like cryotherapy that can help individuals feel a lot more alert and more like a mental reset, because that does boost things like your serotonin levels, especially when they're feeling like super low or stuck. So people might associate cryotherapy with just like athletes, when that's not the case. People come and use it just because they're mentally not in a good state in that time. Something like infrared sauna that helps the body physically release tension, which definitely shifts how someone feels emotionally. Like you might go into the sauna feeling super tense and just a bit stressed, and you come out and it's like you've had like a big deep breath and just let out all of the things that you carried in before your session. So this we also see sauna is very popular during like sad season, and when it's a bit dark outside, a bit cold, sauna is definitely going to help to lift up your mood. And then even with like light therapy, that definitely helps to support that relaxation and recovery. So that helps to reduce that constant ongoing on edge feeling. So a lot of our therapies basically replicate nature, but just through technology. So when you think of the hyperbaric, that's air, the cryo, that's cold, the sauna, that's the sun and heat, and then light therapy that replicates the sun as well. So what it's all about is basically helping the body move out of that stress state so that the mind can follow, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like we're really talking about creating the right environment for our clients, so both mentally and physically, for someone to process what they're going through and what they've been through. So reinforcing things like safety, consistency, support.
Okay, great. So yeah, we're on the same page where we can both agree that it's not just about talking, and it's not just about sporadically using different types of therapies, but it's more about creating the conditions where both work collaboratively together. And when you approach it like that, you're not just managing stress, but you're also supporting self-care and mental well-being. It's a wholeness, basically. So amazing. Okay, so now we'd like to open the floor to questions. If anything we've spoken about today has resonated with you, whether that's stress, feeling overwhelmed, or just wanting to understand yourself a bit more, please feel free to share in the chat or raise your hand. And we've got a few minutes for questions. Don't know if anyone has any. If you don't, that is also absolutely fine, but we'll give you a couple of minutes to... Is there anything you wanted to ask me, Kerrie, that we've not already covered?
No, I think we've covered quite a bit here. It's just really looking at how it relates together, just not mentally, but physically too, which... Oh. Okay.
So we have a question. So are there any free ways to calm your nervous system? So I think, you touched on that. You can...
Yeah, so to calm the nervous system, we mentioned about grounding. So it's really, first of all, it's about building an awareness around, am I in fight or flight, or am I actually going down to shut down? So first of all, it's building awareness around what these stresses are for you. You can do that through journaling, just to reflect. Also seeing the impact it has, how it feels, being more in tune with you physically and emotionally. How am I responding here? Like we said, so the thoughts, feelings and behaviors, the link between all of them. And then once you've analysed, am I kind of alert? Am I in fight or flight? Or am I wanting to withdraw and shut down? You can start using those different techniques we mentioned. So with fight and flight, it would be maybe the 5 senses of grounding. So it's looking at, for example, 5 senses. So the 5 things that you see, 4 things you hear, 3 touch, 2 smell, 1 taste. Taste is always the last one because, we don't have 5 things that can taste normally.
Yeah.
That's common sense. So if it's a piece of food or a drink, or maybe even just a deep breath for grounding, so that would be what you can do. If you feel you getting a bit confused with, oh God, what is it, 5, this, 4, that, it's fine. So just using one of them, sense of touch, is a good one in social settings as well. So if you think 5 is too much, just go for the sense of touch. We always have something we can hold on to, such as a charm on our band or our bracelet, a pendant, maybe even our key rings, something that you can focus on. What does it feel like for you? Is it rough, smooth, hard, soft, hot, cold? Just focusing on that. And then breath work. So breathing in for 4, pausing, exhaling for 8, always exhaling longer than what you inhale, and doing it about 3 or 4 times. That normally is beneficial. If it's more about shutdown, that can be a bit more of a longer process because it's gradually, gently easing into rest and recovery. So it would be a longer process, but things like gentle movements in bed, stretching, and then breath work as well, incorporating mild, gentle exercise like walking, not to push yourself too much.
Yeah.
So it's just being aware really of what state are you in and how you can use on certain techniques to get you into that rest and recovery.
Great, thank you. I hope that answered your question. And then we have 2 more questions. Grief can come in waves, especially with sudden memories. What's the healthiest way to process those moments when they arise?
Okay. Yeah, so grief is very hard and it's very personal to that person. It very depends on the way we manage grief. Like a lot of people, there's a bit of stigma around grief as well, how we process it. And we tend to not really share because it brings up a lot of emotions for us. So it can be very personal to the person, the relationship we've had, whether it's a sense of grief as in losing someone, or whether it's a grief in sense of losing a house, a job, because these are all sense of losses that we have too.
Yeah.
that we experience, and sometimes we don't really understand that we go through a grieving process, especially in relationships when we have a breakup and the person's still around, but we just don't have that connection anymore, and that can be really tough. So it's really looking at how the grief manifests for you, being able to allow yourself to grieve, not to push things down, letting yourself express how you're feeling, whether it's through journaling or whether it's verbally to loved ones, even if you feel you can, but not to push these feelings away, and to have a bit of compassion for yourself through that process.
Thank you. That's a really good answer. That answers a lot. Okay, and then we have, I hope that answered your question. Then we have one more. You touched on how being neurodivergent can make it more difficult to self-regulate. Do you think that affects the techniques you advise to calm down?
It can be. It's very selective, because as you know, there's a wide spectrum of neurodivergence. People assume at times, if you have ADHD, for example, then we all react the same. We don't. And there's so many different behavioral traits with ADHD that we can have. Someone that has probably someone has the hyperactivity, some people don't. Some people assume they have the same stemming, they have, and that's not the case. So it really does depend on the person. It's really a trial and error system to see what works. And actually, even those that aren't neurodivergent, they may find that breathwork works for them, whereas the grounding doesn't as much. It's very individual for the person. It's trial and error to see really what helps, and just practice really to see if, just don't do it one attempt and think, okay, I'm not going to do it, it's not working. It takes a few attempts to really see if it's helping or not.
Okay,
I hope that's answered the question.
I think it did. Got a heart there. And then also just to add, if anyone is neurodivergent or dealing with anything that comes with neurodivergency, things like oxygen therapy is really good, because it starts to regulate you at a cellular level. And then we see a lot of, especially children who come through the doors and they have ADHD and they're not able to speak and communicate verbally, and they do a few sessions of oxygen therapy and we do see improvements. But as I previously mentioned, with these type of therapies specifically, it's not about a one and done sort of thing, or one this week and maybe two a couple of weeks down the line. It's about being a bit consistent to start off with, and then it's maintaining and preventing anything affecting you in the future. So we'll just take one more question, because we've only got a few more minutes left. Are there any ways to manage anxiety?
Okay, so this is fight and flight. This is hyperarousal. So with fight and flight, there's many techniques. So grounding is a great technique to use. If for example, we walk into a room, as we do because our lives are so busy, and we feel we can't use the five senses, a great way to deal with that anxiety in the moment is to just look around where you are, whether it's a room or outside, and thinking, okay, how many cars are there? How many trees? How many red cars? Or how many chairs? It's just being aware of, my body feels at risk and I need to make it feel safe. So if I acknowledge to my body, and you don't have to say it out loud, just internally if you want to, okay, there's a mirror on the wall, there's 4 chairs at the table. It helps your body to realize, oh, I'm here and I feel safe. And actually it's a great technique to help you feel a lot calmer, so that you can go into that state of rest and recovery. That, as well as looking at breath work as well. It just depends on how heightened that sense of anxiety is, and also if it goes into a state of panic, which can happen for some people as well. So it's really being in tune with how you feel and the intensity of that anxiety. And obviously talking therapy is a great way to manage that too.
Thank you. And then I'm obviously not a therapist, but just for me personally, when you mentioned about being present and acknowledging things in the room, something that I always notice calms me down a lot is just doing small things like practicing gratitude. If you're just driving home or you're on the bus home, just I'm grateful for this today, I'm grateful for this, and just bring in those positive things that are happening daily, although you may be anxious or quite depressed. Just recognizing things can just increase your positive mindset. So I suggest that.
Yeah, because when the amygdala, the emotional brain, that is, when it's reacting to a risk, it sees all these red flags, and that's basically what it's doing. It's telling you, it's like an alert system. It's telling you, there's all these red flags and we need to be made aware of them. But what it doesn't see is the green flags, which is the good things, the positivity. So it's really being able to use positive affirmations at times and having that reinforcement to acknowledge these green flags, because it's just not seeing them.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's quite interesting. Okay, so thank you. To gently wrap up today's conversation, I think we can just highlight a few key points. Stress doesn't just stay in the mind, it shows up in the body, and over time it can shape how we feel, think and function day to day. Another point is a lot of us are used to pushing through, but that doesn't always mean we're processing what we're carrying. And most importantly, support doesn't have to be a one-dimensional. Real change comes, I would say, from supporting both the emotional and physical sides together. So if today has made you reflect on your own well-being, this is your reminder that you don't have to navigate it alone, to be fair. There's always, if you don't have friends or family, there's always, I'm sure, different types of support groups or like-minded people that you can openly speak to, or, book a session with Kerrie, do some talking therapy. So yeah, whether that's thoughts or talking, there's always way for you to create space to slow down and to support your body in a variation of ways. Did you want to add anything on that, Kerrie?
Yeah, so it's basically just like you said, about finding what works for you, giving yourself permission to take the first steps, and in a way that helps you to feel safe and manageable, basically.
Great, thank you. So as a way for us to say, I will add that our details are on this PowerPoint at the moment. So if you have any personal questions that you'd like to ask either of us, please jot down our email address and you can contact us directly. And as like a thank you for everyone who joined today, we will be emailing you like a little collaborative discount code that you can get for the Wholeness Pod or Kerrie for any sort of session you want to book going forward. Is that okay with you, Kerrie?
Yeah. So I'll be offering concession rates for anyone that's interested in doing some therapy sessions. And I also offer like a free 15-minute phone consultation. So don't feel you have to book a session. It may just be a consultation just to see how we can work together and discuss any issues you're having.
Okay, great. And thank you so much, Kerrie, for sharing your insights today. Very knowledgeable, very experienced. This has been a great, valuable and also grounding conversation, because like I said, there's things that buzzwords that we throw around, but to actually acknowledge and understand what they mean is really important.
Thank you for having me. It's been really important to have this conversation. I enjoyed the session. It's good.
Yeah, me too. And to everyone who joined today, thank you so much. Like I mentioned, we'll pop a message to your email addresses for like any discount code, or for the discount code post this webinar today. We'll be sharing the link as well for any feedback if you could possibly give us. It only takes like a few minutes, and that would just help us improve our future webinars. If we need to make improvements, it might be perfect as it is. And also any topics that you would want to see us cover for future conversations. We do have our next webinar scheduled on the 19th of May, and that's with private general practitioners Cinnamon Health Group. And we'll be covering the power of knowing your health markers. So feel free to register for that event as well. It will be a free online webinar. And if you would like to listen back to this webinar, we'll share the link, but you can also see it on the Wholeness Pod's YouTube channel. So yeah, I hope everyone has an amazing rest of their day. Thank you so much, Kerrie. Thank you everyone for your comments as well in the chat. We appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye bye.